This video will show you how to transfer a design from paper to your clay. We'll also show you how to carve your design into your pinch pot. So the first thing is to have a good design. So in the last video, we went over how to make a design from 3 resources that we found on the internet. At this point, you should have your design okayed by your teacher before you move on to this next step. So once your teacher has okayed your design, you're going to receive a piece of tracing paper if you're in class and a red water soluble marker. So this is a Papermate Flare pen. If you're working at home, I'm going to show you another trick. So you're going to do yours just a little bit differently. So right now I'm going to start off talking to my in-class students. Then what you're going to do with the tracing paper is you're going to place it on top of your drawing, and we're going to trace over this with the red pen. One thing to know about this, as we trace over our design with the red pen, we're essentially making a stamp. And when we stamp this onto our pinch pot, it's going to turn out backwards. So it'll be like a mirrored image of your drawing. If that bothers you, my recommendation would be to trace in red pen and then flip it over and trace the back side. So then that way you can have your design going the right way. And if you need help, if you're having a hard time picturing that, you can come see me and I can help you. So I'm going to take a minute. I'm not going to do, I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to trace my design. As I'm tracing my design, if there's any lines that maybe I used in my drawing, but I don't necessarily want to carve away, I don't have to trace those. The only lines that are going to transfer are any lines that you've outlined with this red pen. Now, because it's a water soluble marker, what that means is it's not permanent. So if we get it wet, it's going to smear. So we want to use that to our advantage. Those of you working at home, if you have a flare pen, you can do this also. Don't try to use a pen or a marker that's permanent because you'll waste your time. It won't work. It has to be water soluble for this method of transferring to work. So I'm getting closer, just need another minute. Another thing, as you're tracing or outlining your design onto your tracing paper, on your actual design that you drew, I asked you to color in the areas that were going to be carved away. For this, if it helps you, you can color it in with the red pen, but really you don't have to because you'll have your drawing right there by you and you'll be able to refer to it as you start carving. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I finished tracing my symbol. I'm going to move my drawing over just so that we can focus on the tracing paper, but I have it close by in case I need it as a reference. All right, the next thing is going to be to take your pinch pot out of its bag. So I did that already, so I have mine right here, ready to go. Before we can transfer the design onto our pinch pot, we have to add a little bit of water to the pinch pot. Now, we're not going to soak it, but we just want to get the surface where we're going to be attaching our carving or attaching our design. We want it to be damp. Okay, so I'm going to find where my carving is going to go. So let's see, it's going to go about right here. I'm just going to take a little bit of paper towel and get it wet. So I have a bucket here I'm just going to dip into. Again, I don't want to get this super wet, so you can just see that I'm going to squeeze all the water out of my paper towel. Just slightly damp. If you're working at home and if you have a little sponge, you could use a sponge or you could use a paper towel. Okay, so let's see. So I'm just going to kind of dab at the surface of my pinch pot just to get it a little bit softer. Add a little bit more water. Now, if you add too much water, okay, so if it gets shiny like mine is right here, you'll have to let it dry for a second. If the clay surface is too wet, the marker is just gonna smudge everywhere. So we don't want it to be too wet. We just want it, we want the surface of the clay to get tacky almost. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry for a second. Fan it off. Okay, so once it's not as shiny, and you can see that dried pretty quickly because my clay is at dry leather hard right now. So while I'm letting this dry for another minute, I want to show you something because right now my piece of tracing paper is kind of big and it might help you. I would actually recommend doing this if you have a pair of scissors, or you can just maybe rip your piece of tracing paper a little bit smaller, or you can come see me and I can help you trim this. But I like to trim around my design and get as close to it as I'm able to. It just helps to smooth it out onto the surface of your pinch pot a little bit better. Now, if you're doing a band instead of like the badge like this one is, you'll really want to make sure that you trim down your tracing paper. Otherwise, as you try to apply it, it's going to fold and get creases in it. Okay. So the next step is going to be to place my tracing paper with the red ink side onto my pinch pot where I just got that surface kind of tacky, okay? And I might even just go over it one more time just so I don't do all of this hard work for nothing. Okay, so now I'm going to take my design and I'm going to flip it so that the pen is down on my pinch pot. And I want to make sure that I'm taking into account how I want it to sit on my pinch pot. Now, once you place this on your pinch pot, you're not going to want to move it. If it moves too much, you're going to get almost like a double image, and it's going to be really hard to tell which lines you need to transfer. All right, so the next step is just going to be to use your fingers to rub like this over your red lines. And you're going to see as you start doing this that you're almost going to be able to see through the tracing paper. And that's what we want. So I'm just going to do a little bit because I'm noticing I can't see through the tracing paper up here. And I'm worried that maybe I missed a spot with my water. So I'm just going to peek. But it looks like it's transferring. So this is what it's going to look like. So I'm in good shape here. If I would have gotten my clay too wet, that would not have transferred as easily. So I'm going to take just a couple more minutes. I'm going to pause and do this so you don't watch me, and I'm going to get my design transferred onto my clay along all of my red lines. And I think my design is transferred. I'm going to slowly peel my paper away. If I do this too quickly and my lines didn't transfer, it's going to be almost next to impossible to line this back up. So if you have to redo it, then you'll have to pick a different spot on your pinch pot, retrace your design with the red pen, and try again. So we want to try to get it right the first time. So I'm going to start over here, and I'm just going to slowly start peeling back my tracing paper. And if I see that there's an area I missed, I can quickly place it back down. But it looks good so far. Pretty happy with the way that it transferred. Okay, so there's going to be one more step that I'm going to show you in this video, and that's going to be outlining your design. So in the next video, I'll show you how to carve away the areas that need to be carved, but we probably won't get to all of that in one class period. So if you are able to transfer your design onto your pinch pot, it's very important that you also outline all of those red lines. And the reason for that is if we had to wrap this in a damp paper towel or even a dry paper towel, there's a chance that your markings can go away. So we don't want to lose those markings. So I have over here, this is the scribe tool, and there's a pointed end on one side and a flat end on the other. This is what we're going to use to trace with. Please don't use your pin tool. You'll carve too deeply. And one other thing I noticed, the new scribe tools that were handed out to you have a very sharp point to them, and they're cutting into the clay a little bit too deep. So if you got one that has a really sharp point to it. If you could come see me, I have a piece of sandpaper that you can kind of sand away the top part of this down. It will help you to carve better if it's not quite so sharp. We want it to be almost like a dull pencil. Okay, so when tracing, don't go too deep. You just want to lightly make an indentation in the clay just so that you don't lose your design. So I'm taking my time and I'm just carefully outlining all of my lines. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and finish outlining mine on my own, because I think you guys can do this on your own. So once you get to this point, you'll start outlining. One other thing with the carving or with the outlining, you're going to get a lot of crumbs that come off when you're carving. Those are called burrs, okay? And the burrs we'll be able to clean off later, but you're gonna have to be cleaning your tool off as you go. So you're gonna wanna make sure that you take care of your mess after you're done carving. Now, I'm not gonna make you watch me outline this whole thing. You'll see my finished outline for the next video that'll show you how to carve. Okay, but I do want to take a moment at this point and talk to my e-learners specifically. So those of you working at home, you're going to do something similar, but I have a couple of other ideas for you if you do not have the tracing paper and the red flare pen. Okay, so there's another option. Okay, so hopefully everybody at home has some sort of a sandwich baggie, some sort of a plastic baggie, and a permanent marker. Okay, plastic baggie and a permanent marker is what you're going to need, and your drawing. Okay, so here's my drawing again. I want to make it so that my drawing can fit inside of this plastic bag. So I'm going to cut mine, since I have a sandwich size bag, I'm going to cut out my design here. And then I'm going to place it inside my sandwich bag. If you don't have a sandwich bag, you could probably do this also on some like saran wrap would probably work. Or you can just do it with the paper. So what I'm about to show you, you'll see here in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and place that inside of the baggie. Right? So it's important that it's inside of the baggie. Then you're going to use your permanent marker to outline all of your lines. And your permanent marker really can be any color you want it to be, just so long as it's permanent. So that way it will transfer when you draw on the baggie. Now, as you're drawing, make sure you like hold the baggie down so it doesn't bunch on you. I'm not going to trace my whole design. I'm just going to trace a little bit of it. Just so I can show you the technique, because once we get past the transferring of the design, you're going to be carving the exact same way as everyone in class. You'll be outlining the same way as everyone in class. And for you guys at home, you could just use a dulled pencil, any sort of like a dull pencil like this one. Okay, so this would work really nicely for outlining, and in fact, I'll use that to show you. Okay, so let's pretend like I've traced my entire design there. We'll let the Sharpie dry for a minute. I'm going to take my piece of paper out of the bag. So the reason for doing this is the plastic bag is much more flexible than the paper is, and it's going to form around my pinch pot a lot nicer than the paper would. Now, if you don't have a baggie, you could do this with the paper. You would place it on top of your pinch pot where you want it to go, and you'll trace over it to make an indentation. Okay, but let me just show you with the plastic bag. So once this is dry, you're going to place the plastic bag with your design on top, and you're going to figure out where you want it to go. So let's say I want my design's going to go right here. I want to make sure that I'm holding it down flat. And then using a dull pencil or even a ballpoint pen would work too. You're going to trace over your lines with the pencil on top of the baggie, and you're making an indentation in the clay. So I want to go nice and slow. I want to take my time and trace over my lines. As I'm doing this, I'm thinking that maybe my plastic bag's a little too thick. It might be better if you cut the bag so that you're not going through like both halves of it, but this is working out just fine. So let me just peek and show you how it's making an indentation into the clay. So for those of you working at home, you'll be able to just, once you trace this on here, you don't need to go back in because you've made the indentation. And then next class, we'll talk about carving. Okay. Thank you all for listening.